Tolu, welcome to Kolbe Times.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Tolu, my wife and I have had the great pleasure of getting to know you a few years, but we haven't really talked very much about your journey as a doctor and the great differences and the rich experience going from Nigeria to Canada. Just to tell me a little bit about why did you want to become a doctor?
Started for me as a passion and from a point of personal experience about the challenges I faced in my health, you know, and I was, going back and forth frequently to the hospital to see doctors and all that. So that, drove my interest into, hey, what's going on? I need to get a better understanding of what's going on, and maybe I could help myself in a way. And so over time, I just kept my focus like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But then as I got into medicine itself at medical school, I also developed passion for caring for others. So, and that also reinforced my drive. And yeah, that's basically it. So, and I don't have any regrets about my decisions.
Well, you've been on quite a journey. You not only studied to be a doctor, but you practiced as a doctor and as a specialist in Nigeria. And then you became a doctor in Canada. What kept you going through this challenging process?
Well, I think it's just the passion I've had for practice of medicine as a whole that that kept me going. And I told myself I don't know anything else other than this medicine, like caring for others, and being a doctor has been my lifelong passion. And I'm here, although I have a few challenges to and a few hurdles to climb, but I was prepared to go all the way, to give it what it takes to get back into practice in Canada. And I'm glad I was able to get that done.
Now, you've gone from working in a very urban setting, and not only in Nigeria, but also in Edmonton, Canada. Now you're in a rural area. How is medical practice different in a rural area?
It's quite interesting that question you asked, because in the urban centers, it's a huge population, and you might get to treat just one person depending on your discipline, like just maybe the father in the family, or maybe the mom, or just the son. But in the rural area, you get to know everyone, close enough. Even your co-workers are the family members of your patients. So it's a close knit in the rural area. My first experience was, first patient I'd seen, and I didn't realize that that was the husband of one of the clinic managers. So, and it was later on I realized, oh, they have the same last name, and this makes sense to say, oh, this is the husband and this is the wife. So that makes it a bit interesting, I would put it, because then everyone knows you and you know everyone, and people come and say, oh, you treated my father-in-law yesterday and he said you did good, or otherwise if you didn't do good. So that's the clear difference. It's like there is a closer connection with patients and with family members than with the city, where it's there too many, it's so diverse, and you might not get to know their families in detail, as much as you would in the rural area.
So, would you say that medicine is better practiced in a rural area compared to the cities?
I wouldn't say that, because working in a rural area has its own challenges. So I'll talk from the standpoint of a physician as well as a standpoint of a patient. Okay? The good thing about on the standpoint of the patient is that yes, you could see your family physician more often. You could have a closer connection. You could meet at the grocery store. You could meet, at the cafe. You could meet, anywhere. Like, and then that gives you a sense of connection. And sometimes, people also want to ask you a few things about their health when they're outside, but you are able to better manage. But the flip side of it is that because you don't have access to everything you need, like if a patient comes in really sick, something as simple as an ultrasound is a big challenge, and you'd have to send that patient to a different hospital. Like the closest to where I work, it's a 40 minutes drive either way. So, those are the challenges of working in the rural area. But if you were in the city, you would have access to those things. Like when I worked at the rural, I had all the specialists in the hospital. I had every type of investigation I needed. So it was almost at the snap of a finger, you get it done. So those are the peculiarities of rural practice as compared to what practice is like in the city.
Another big difference I understand is that you're working not only as a family physician, but you're working primarily with seniors. How is that different from the typical sort of practice for a doctor or a specialist?
So for everyone, you would have different patient population. Okay. So as a family doctor, you're kind of the doctor from, the 1 week old to the 95-year-old. So you get to see everyone. And I guess as a specialist too, depending on what your specialty is, you are also involved with, seeing patients, of different ages. But especially for someone like me where I practice, because I'm also in charge of the long-term care patients. So most of them are, seniors and who've got multiple medical issues that you have to manage. So you get to see a wide variety of patients, but sometimes you also get a specific age group that will be maybe primarily assigned to you, just like in my case. So I wouldn't say specifically that as family physicians, you see more seniors than you would see other population. But again, because of where the practice is, more seniors live in the rural place than in the cities. So most of them don't even want to go to the city. So they would prefer to stay back. So yeah, I guess that's why the population you would see would be more of seniors than younger people.
Working with a rural population, especially seniors, you must have come up with some thoughts about how all of us can be healthier for a longer period of time in our lives.
Yes. Health is, well, if you look at what the definition of health is, it's not only about your physical health, it involves your mental health, social health, financial health. It involves everything. It's a journey and not a destination. So it's a continuous process, and each one has different challenges along the way. So for the most part, I would say, it starts with what you eat, healthy eating habits, staying active as much as possible, which is not always possible depending on what issues people have. But for seniors especially would be, because seniors are a bit more prone to having comorbidities, like a lot of illnesses that probably started younger would manifest and become complicated if not managed well. And those things show up in the seniors. So adhering to, the medications, and then the regular follow-up with your doctor or your family doctor or your specialist, as the case may be. So I would say, like I said, like eating healthy, staying active as much as possible. Smoking is a no-no. Most people will tell you that. Moderate as much as possible to low alcohol intake, social, those other things that would further complicate your health are things we would try to do away with. So
Those are really good suggestions, and they make a lot of sense. Now, you have had an international experience. How would you compare the medical and healthcare we have here to the other countries, especially in Africa, that you've seen?
There are differences in terms of accessibility of healthcare and also acceptability of healthcare. Okay. And there are also a lot of similarities. Okay. So back in Nigeria, I can speak specifically about Nigeria, which I also think would be, a lot of African countries, is that the accessibility of healthcare isn't as good. And that's when you compare patient population to the availability of healthcare facilities or healthcare specialists, doctors, nurses, and everyone. So that creates a huge challenge for the doctor to manage with limited resources and and all those other things that come with providing good healthcare. The case here, I've worked here like about 5 years now. I see that, of course, accessibility is better. I won't say it's 100%, but it's much better here because you can have access to specialists and have access to whatever investigations you want, in as much as you want to. And because patients don't pay out of pocket, it's free compared to back home where you have to pay. So people won't show up to the hospital because they don't even have the funds to do that. Whereas here, it's not like, oh, I have to pay out of pocket. Maybe the medications, yes, but at least consulting with the specialist and everything else or getting some investigations done. Yeah. So those are the peculiarities and the challenges. And I talked about acceptability of healthcare. A lot of people back home still shy away from going to the hospital. And especially if it concerns mental health, that's a big issue. But here, I find, of course, the larger population still will go to the hospital here, but I still find a few people who also have either had a bad experience or they still don't believe in, coming to the hospital and except things get really, really bad. So, yeah, so that's how I would compare, working back in Africa and working in Canada.
One last question,
Yeah.
which I think is a key question for you, Tolu, is the role of faith, in your case, Christian faith, on all of this that you've talked about, this journey, this going from one world to another world to practicing with patients of all different kinds. Tell me a little bit about how your faith impacts that.
If you study the Bible, Luke was a physician, and working as a physician I see it as a God-given gift. Even though you have to go to medical school, you have to study, you have to be in a good state of health for you to help others. And the place of faith is sometimes that people are coming with issues that, okay, maybe I've studied about this, I've seen it, but there are times where you need God's help to deal with some other issues. Like, see, you're battling with your own, let me use the word, your own demons. You have your own stuff going on, but you also have to go out there and help someone. You're probably doing worse than that person is doing, but you have to be strong, almost like a superhuman to get there. And sometimes as a human being, you're just weak. You don't want to speak to anyone. You just want to be in your own shell. And that's where faith comes in, and being a Christian, being prayerful, asking for God's strength, to deal with all of this. And just like in any other walk of life, you have people who are challenging. You have challenging patients. You might have difficult co-workers. How do you deal with all of that? With prayer and leaning on the Holy Spirit, it helps you navigate those things. And your service is ultimately to God, but you haven't seen God. But how could you love God if you can't love his people?
Beautiful. Is there any parting comments or any thoughts before we finish, Tolu, that you would want to leave with people?
I will just say, as last comment is, and I've said this earlier, is that for people to try and speak up, and sometimes, the doctor is just, it's like we're digging, into questions, and sometimes there are questions that are quite uncomfortable, and there are questions you don't want to answer, but we're just trying to make sure that we can get all the information we need and process that information so we can provide you with the answer. And sometimes we don't have the answers. We'll have to say, you know what, I can't tell you this is what is wrong. So I will have to get back to you. So the other thing is for people to help with, being compliant, with our advice. We're not the best. We're not. Sometimes we give advice we don't even use. But again, in the context of a therapeutic relationship you have with the patient, it's like you want the best for them, and you want them to do better in their health and in their life generally. So and things, we can have conflicts, but we should be able to at least discuss why those conflicts are and how we can resolve those conflicts.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Tolu. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me, Bill.